Hi folks, welcome to Thursday's edition of I Write Radio podcast stroke videocast. We're going to go with FMQs and leave it at that because I've no doubt it will lead us in other directions. Jimmy, what did you think?
I'm just going to say, I've not got a clicky pen today, so you're all right.
Sure, John. I thought it was all right. No surprise that Ruth's dead cat was an actual fatality today. So, interesting that she went on crime. I mean, victims of crime. Come on, there's no government on the planet that's going to have a decent approval rating for victims of crime. They've just been victims of crime, for Christ's sake. But the fact that she wanted to go on crime at all, I'm interested in, just because I wonder if she'd maybe had advice from the Advocate General for Scotland before he resigned. I
think maybe she went on crime so she could avoid every cock-up that's been made at Westminster.
Aye, absolutely. Looking for safe ground.
Oh, exactly. That's what I thought immediately, as soon as she mentioned victims.
Failing to realise that the whole of the Scottish population are about to become victims of crime perpetrated by the Westminster government's power grab.
Aye.
Very true. And I was wondering if you're bringing up Ruth Davidson, I hear that they're going to go ahead with the railway line down to Leven, which is Buckhaven and Methil as well, isn't it? And Ruth Davidson's from there, isn't she? Do you think it was her that came up with the money?
Well, it won't make any difference to her. She'll be living in London, will she not?
No, but I mean, she gets the credibility, doesn't she? If she's
well, she's had nothing to do with it. She was a Glasgow MSP and then an Edinburgh MSP.
Aye, it'll be a decision taken by ScotRail based on, frankly, it'll be a decision based on the fact that they're still no building houses on this side of the Forth, or they're no building many. So a lot of people that live in Edinburgh are having to go buy houses over there and commute.
Good thing, good thing. Is Fife the central belt?
Any new rail line's a good thing, mate, but we see with the difference that the Borders Railway has made, any new rail line is a decent thing. I think it's case one for independence. Let's spend 10% of our transport budget on new rail lines in the first 5 years or so.
I think the track is still the railway track is still most of the way there. Goes as far as the big distilleries at Windygates.
Is it used for them?
I think it was used for freight up until recently. And there's another track all the way from Dunfermline through to Kincardine, Alloa onto Stirling, which they could reopen as well.
Good.
Absolutely. Good. As soon as we get control of our own purse strings, these things are all viable. And
I'm sure the Westminster government will consider funding it.
I think not. I think the only rail lines that they'll be funding will be HS2 and a little bit in the north of England, just to placate them daft northerners in case they have ideas above their station.
Maybe electrify it with toy clockwork trains. Okay, well, Ruth was basically, his main job today was to ask questions that basically avoided anything at all to do with a brouhaha in Westminster.
Absolutely anything at all, which she did very successfully. I'll give her due.
Well, I don't think she did. Because she asked what was being done. The First Minister then listed 3 things that were being done. And then she said there wasn't enough being done. And the First Minister went, COVID, there's a pandemic. So 2019 this came in?
Yeah, I do wonder if Ruth actually spoke to anyone in the legal community. I made a joke about the Advocate General, but I wonder if she spoke to anyone in the legal community, because other than the programmes that have been instigated by the Scottish Government in the last couple of years, I wonder if there are any new ideas out there. Ruth certainly never offered any.
No, well, she doesn't actually want the situation cured because she won't have anybody to complain about if she does. We've just lost Stuart. I think his neighbour has overridden his Wi-Fi again.
He'll be raging. So
Mr. Leonard, Tricky
I was going to
Dicky.
say, so Stuart's Wi-Fi is as effective as Richard Leonard then. But he's gone on testing, and I found that ineffective. He's gone with a survey for Unison. Aye, okay, I know that they fund you, Richard, but you're actually allowed to look at surveys other than by your funders, mate.
He's kind of become the unions man at Holyrood. Every week, it's something from the unions. Are the unions people speaking to him?
I think that might just be one of two things, mate. They are the only people speaking to him, and he's got to keep them on side to make sure that the backstabbers can't get the knife into his back.
Aye. Hi, Stuart. Welcome back.
I'm very surprised that happened. I connected up today before the show with the cable because I am getting trouble from my neighbours.
I'm not 100% sure listeners need to know this. And you've gone again. We'll keep going. So Richard's question, testing. And basically quite difficult as it's the UK government's side of the testing that seems to be suffering at the moment.
Aye, I mean, it was made worse when that daft green wifey, Alison Johnson, because she asked specific stuff about the UK testing. And there's nothing that Nicola can do to alter that. You know, she can't improve that. All she can do is phone London and say, will you guys get your act together? But if London doesn't get their act together, there's very little that she can do about it.
Well, she's had assurances.
Aye, but I mean, you get assurances for a London Tory. I'm pretty sure Arthur Scargill got assurances for London Tories. They didn't need to actually follow through on them and deliver on any of them. Testing,
Stuart, you've been looking at a few articles from elsewhere.
Well, I thought it was worth having a look at what was happening in Ireland and Northern Ireland, because to see, well, obviously Northern Ireland is supposed to be in the same UK Four Nations testing programme, and I had a look at the Belfast Telegraph, and it's all going tits up there. It's the same as here, really. Whereas on looking at that summary of what's happening in the Republic, no complaints at all about testing. Not a problem. So what can you say?
Is it going tits up here? Here, do you mean the UK or do you mean Scotland?
UK. Well, but it's not going to be long before we get rationed from London, is it?
Well, he hasn't announced. According to Twitter, one of his minions has basically admitted that there will be rationing.
Yeah, aye. There certainly looks like there's going to be rationing in England for testing. And the scuttlebutt around Westminster, I do like that word scuttlebutt. I'll use it specifically in case that wee freak show Liberal Democrat for West Edinburgh is listening. But the gossip around Westminster is that the government have just lost control. Boris and Hat Mancock have got no clue whatsoever of what they're doing, and they have no idea how bad this could get over the winter.
Well, I mean, it's quite serious. I mean, it's not just a political issue, it becomes a personal issue for all of us, because ourselves and our families are going to be at risk again.
Aye, it could get worse than how it was at the start of this year. And Serco, for all the money that's been thrown at them, are delivering as poorly as we would expect Serco to deliver, really. Congratulations, Mr. Soames. Well done. You'll get a bonus this year because you've got a couple of government contracts. Do you think you'll manage to kill more Britons than your grandfather, though?
Nice one, Jimmy.
Ooh, good one. Joan McAlpine, what did she have to say at First Minister's questions? She had the planted question, although she didn't need to have it planted. She's a strong woman. She used to work for Murdoch, didn't she? And she used to be editor of the Sunday Times in Scotland, but you wouldn't know it from where she talks these days. She gave the First Minister a chance to say what she wanted to say, which was fine. I want to complain about the likes of Neil Findlay. These people standing up.
Well, whoa.
Sorry,
the question was about the power grab from Westminster.
Aye.
And the First Minister basically turned around and said the only way to get around the power grab is to become independent.
And she said, I think it will happen, she said.
she seems to be on quite. I get the impression she feels that she's on quite solid ground with this power grab. It gives her a lot of sticks to beat them with, and I think she seems to be quite enjoying it.
Well, there's huge problems with it. I mean, as I mentioned yesterday, how does English votes for English laws affect it?
Mm.
If Scottish MPs aren't allowed to vote on certain English legislation, and that legislation is then used through the UK marketplace to alter legislation at Holyrood, that's dictate.
It's dictatorial. You're right. I struggle to see how, unless this conspiracy theories are true and that they're going to drop a couple of these things further down the line I struggle to see how they get that through the House of Lords. I mean, the House of Lords is packed with unionists. We know that. But the House of Lords is loath in its history to do anything that could be construed as illegal. You know what I mean? They're very much, they're sticklers for things being done to the letter. And I struggle to see how they think they can force this through there.
Well, I don't think that's your problem, Jimmy. I think your problem is, what are this government going to do about taking power from the House of Lords? What will they enact to make sure the House of Lords can't obstruct their legislation?
Aye, that's true. They've not shown any compunction about screwing everybody else, so why would they show compunction about screwing the Lords?
You know, just sticking another 50 Brexiteers, turn them into Lords.
I think a lot of the opposition is going to come from Tory Lords, because they're old school.
Aye,
they're not disruptors.
Aye, I mean, mate, this gives your Philip Hammonds and that gives them massive opportunity to mess Boris around.
Well, and if you look at Westminster's man in the Scottish Law's resignation, for Keane to resign, he's an ex-chairman of the Tory party in Scotland. Now, it might have just been the fact he didn't want to lose his income from being a QC, but if it is a genuine matter of not wishing to break the law, that's huge.
But did you not see the tweets about the bar council or whatever they're called in England? They were the story was they had threatened everybody not to cooperate with the government on this issue, and of course the Brexiteer members of the bar were complaining about this. Ooh. But I gather the lawyers outside the ERG and the mad Brexiteers are very angry.
Well, I mean, you can't be a lawyer and be prepared to break the law. You can't even talk about it.
I think Lord Keane, I think it was personal yesterday. I think it's he's looking out for himself and his reputation. As for lawyers in England, they're angry anyway. They've been angry for the last few years with the austerity cuts that have been imposed upon the CPS, and they're not getting cases into court in time. They're not getting an investigation done correctly. So this might just be the straw that breaks the camel's back as far as the legal community is concerned.
Well, they've also had their
against the government. That makes things very difficult for them very quickly.
They've had their payments cut.
Aye, they've been. Everything's been nailed, mate. Absolutely everything's been nailed. Lawyers like to make money. We all ken that.
And you throw into the mix the judicial reviews being reviewed, and that may be. I don't know what the.
But there's much more
thinking about that.
There's a much more basic element in this, and that's wages.
I appreciate that. Yeah.
I read the Secret Barrister's book that he published.
Right.
And the average wage now for a lawyer south of the border is like 24,000 a year. It is literally the average wage.
Mm-hmm. That's not what.
Taken a huge dunt.
Aye, lawyers didn't make average salary, mate. Maybe a crap lawyer did, the odd one on here or there, but lawyers didn't make average salary. They make far and above that, or they should.
Well, I mean, the cut. What's it called? Where the government pay for your lawyer?
Legal aid.
Legally.
Legal aid. The cuts in legal aid have had a huge, and apparently they're losing droves of young lawyers because they expected to be able to afford to buy a house. You know.
And a Ferrari.
Well, the
And-
thing is, mate, if you've got a
well-
decent, if you've got a half decent law degree, there are an awful lot of career paths open to you that aren't necessarily anything to do with the courts.
Well, I mean, what it means is that all the good lawyers go into commercial law,
Mm.
contract law. You know.
Well, maybe
There's
that's what they
money
want.
in
Maybe,
criminal law.
maybe that's another one of Boris, of Dominic's cunning plans. Maybe he doesn't want legal scrutiny.
I
Or if he
would-
wants legal scrutiny, he doesn't want it with the best legal brains scrutinising him.
I don't think that's going the right direction for him. If the best brains are going into contract law, there'll be a lot of Tories not happy about that.
Aye. Well, I just had a wee bubble as well that just off Twitter there. Apparently Boris hasn't spoke to Sadiq Khan since the start of May. Now, they're looking at possible increases in lockdown in London this weekend. You know how they're going with the northeast of England tonight. London's just about as bad. Surely, if Boris and Sadiq Khan didn't like each other, public health should come before their fallout.
But is this really a surprise? I mean, they don't speak to Newsnight. They don't speak to Radio 4. You know,
Channel 4 News,
why would they waste their time speaking to anybody that doesn't agree with them?
But then the Mayor of London
Don't let
has-
anybody in the cabinet that doesn't agree with them.
Aye, but Boris knows the Mayor of London's got considerable power over London, mate. You kind of want him on side, really.
What's he going to do? Shut all the roads around Parliament? There's an idea.
So did he? Did
Shall
he
we
talk about roads? Don't talk about roads.
Okay, I don't go there. Did you guys catch any of the time that Boris, apart from PMQs yesterday, he was in committee, wasn't he?
Oh,
Aye, he was laughable in committee, mate.
And, he looks ill. He looks incapable. And what can you say?
do we
If
want
ever-
to have a look at him
Oh, well,
Aye,
oh,
let's
aye.
go and have a giggle.
being questioned by Angus Brendan McNeil?
Brendan McNeil.
Brilliant. Aye, I enjoyed Angus Brendan having a dig at him.
What am I doing? Here we go then. Here's Angus Brendan O'Neill doing what Scottish MPs should do.
And the happy reading is that poll after poll shows that Scotland wants independent. It wants to be independent like Ireland I mentioned earlier. Well, when will you agree to the Scottish Government's request for a Section 30? Will you ever agree to the Scottish Government's request for a Section 30 to hold an independence referendum?
The Scottish Nationalist Party
It's Scottish Government.
fought the referendum in 2014 very clearly on the understanding that this was a once in a
Not at all.
generation
That was not written in the
event.
agreement.
That
Order.
was,
Order.
that was
Let him answer the question.
something that I believe both Nicholas Sturgeon and Alex Salmond said at the time in persuading people to cast their votes. They voted.
You said you'd die in a
they
ditch.
voted. They voted overwhelmingly or very substantially to stay in the union. I believe the union.
So are
is
you
a
going to
great,
give a Section
beautiful,
30?
a great,
Order.
I believe the union is a great and a beautiful thing, and I think we
Yes or
should,
no?
yes, I think we should keep it, and I don't think that a generation has elapsed since 2014. And my understanding of human biology,
So that, is that a
About
no?
15 seconds left.
Is that
I
a
don't
no?
think a generation has elapsed.
Is that a yes or a no?
It is a statement of the obvious that I don't think a generation has elapsed.
So it's a no to a Section 30, regardless of the wishes of the Scottish people.
I think
And the
it
polls
was,
and the
it was
polls and
said
the
very
polls that
clearly
showed
in
independence.
2014 that this was a once in
That
a
was not
generation.
said. That was not said clearly. That's not in the Edinburgh
Right.
Agreement.
Moving
Was
on.
that not said
I
by the
think.
Scottish?
Next
Not
time,
in the
I'll
Edinburgh
sit,
Agreement.
order. Next time I think I'll sit you further away from you.
Bernard Jenkins saved his bacon.
Aye.
I don't think there's much doubt that Bernard Jenkins did everything he could to undermine the question from a member of his committee.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, And that's why
don't-
Bernard Jenkins is there.
Oh, absolutely. That's why he's on that committee, mate, to bend that committee to the will of the Conservative front bench. But good on Angus McNeil. Somebody has to get in about him. It's nice to see just how weak that you said it was once in a generation event line actually is when people question it, because there's absolutely nothing behind that other than to keep asserting the same thing, even though we know that to be a falsehood.
I'm waiting for somebody to put together a list of quotes where various people have said about general elections, about, well, Boris is dying a ditch,
Dying in ditches, aye.
you know, just to go, right, okay. Well, I'm actually looking forward to them quoting Nicola Sturgeon saying, and we will be free and independent next year. Because if a word carries that much weight, we don't need a referendum.
Oh, that's true. Aye.
That's a good way.
Stuart, see how you mentioned Neil Findlay earlier? It's kind of stuck out with me as well. Now, I'd seen Neil Findlay do this on Twitter yesterday, and he stood up in Parliament and did it again today. He's talking about the Burton's Biscuits workers, but he's called them key workers. Now, I know he's a bit of a fatso like me, but in which stretch of the imagination are folk that make biscuits key workers? They just aren't they?
Apparently, it's a biscuit season. We didn't know that either.
Well,
red season. Ooh.
I have to say, I cannot remember an occasion when there wasn't a plate of biscuits set out in the old folks' home.
It's like when you go to the committee rooms in Holyrood, there's always a tea and biscuits laid
And
out.
bottled water.
And bottled water. The other thing about Neil Findlay annoyed me was that he assumed that Christmas was, that they'd need all these biscuits for Christmas. Well, nobody's guaranteed we're going to have a Christmas yet.
Oh, has there not already been a headline about, it's just as well it wasn't Halloween, eh? Has Sturgeon not been accused of cancelling Christmas?
No, but she can palm that off onto Jason Leach like he got lumbered for Halloween, Father's Day, Mother's Day,
Easter.
Aye, he's
forget
been
Easter.
lumbered for everything with Jason, the bold Jason. He's still judging by an interview I seen from his back garden, he gets well paid enough for it.
I thought you might have the Daily Mails. I nearly had it ready myself, but from my background this morning. The Daily Mail UK version versus the Scottish version. So we'll need to put that up tomorrow, I think.
I tend not to go for the Daily Mail too often.
Strangely enough, I wouldn't wipe my sphincter upon the Daily Mail, but there we go. Just before we go off FMQs, chaps, isn't it noticeable? That was an hour again today. Thanks, Ken McIntosh. But it's noticeable that Nicola faces double the length of questioning and scrutiny that the Bullingdon Bobag has to face. And she deals with it 1,000,000 times better.
Oh, of course.
I actually would never complain about her being on camera for as long as possible. She's become a huge asset.
Yeah. But she is under, the only time she was under pressure today was the question of testing, and she's gagging, as we said yesterday, she's dying to have a go at Boris and his government and the way they've handled it, but yeah, obviously politically it's impossible.
I actually thought Willie Rennie put her under pressure with his "have you stopped beating your wife" question. That was nasty, and she reacted to it. I mean, the end of his question was phrased in such a way as he was asking her to take personal responsibility for not allowing families to get together. And she was quite right to react to it. It was actually pretty disgusting.
Would that be Willie Rennie, who sits next door to a FUD who organised 1,000 people to hook up in a park last
Cole
week?
Hamilton.
A wee meeting.
Oh, nothing will come of that, but yes, 1,000 people organised for a protest.
Well, okay, let's be fair here. He's claiming there was 1,000 people.
The copper said there was about 600.
Well, the city chambers are saying 600, and the original number that permission was given for was 200,
Mm-hmm.
socially distanced.
And it was outdoors.
And basically what he's saying was, it's no my fault that I leafleted 40 million people, including half of Australia, that more people turned up.
I wonder where he got the funding for his leaflets. Do you think he's agency controller maybe chucked him a few grand to get them printed up especially quick?
No, but he's being what Cole Hamilton is. He's on the attack, blaming everybody but himself, and out lying.
Yeah,
by
well,
the way.
that was a lie that he put out on Twitter yesterday. That the local councillor complained to the police. The police actually approached the City of Edinburgh Council, not the other way around. So, and he knew that when he dissembled that false information. But then that's not new for Mr. Cole Hamilton. He's got
Well, do you know, I was always surprised at how willing the Liberal Democrats were to twist the truth and lie. And then once the internet came along and you started seeing their leaflets, etc., and the way they used graphs and stuff, it's like endemic within the party. They just don't bother with the truth.
Yeah, you look at some of them though, and they're too sleek to be Tories. They're worse than Tories. I mean, you know how much I hate Tories, but if I could come round a corner at 25 mile an hour and scalp an MSP, I'd love it to be Alec Cole Hamilton, because he's that short as well that I'd go right over the top of him and he would never recover.
Well, the way he treated Michelle Thompson was absolutely outrageous.
Mm-hmm. She's trying to make a comeback, is she?
I think she maybe is.
She's past vetting. So
I'd like to see her back, actually.
Aye, be interesting to see if she gets a candidacy somewhere.
What about
battle hardened now?
Natalie McGarry,
she'll never get back.
She's still in court for the 25 grand for women.
Aye.
She'll never get back.
She should. Well, I'm sorry, it's embezzlement, mate. She should actually be in a jail sentence, and the fact that she's using mental health issues in a young bairn to try and get out of it is reprehensible. She should be going to jail for embezzling that kind of money, particularly given the salary that she was on. Anyway, to go on something a bit more positive, Nora, you sent a couple of interesting links this morning, and I'd like to mention them. Philip Stevens in the FT and Neil Asherson in the London Review of Books. A couple of really interesting pieces that kind of give us hope that not all London-based journalists just read a press release. Some of them do actually look into things like journalists used to do, get their own sources and try and come up with reality. Particularly the Neil Asherson piece I thought was really interesting.
I kind of wish they'd all just be the usual dickheads. I sometimes worry that a bit of good sense being directed at their English readers is bad for the Yes movement.
Bad for us, aye.
But it was nice to see somebody who'd thought about it, although somebody who stuck rigidly to the English subsidise the Scots mantra.
Yeah, that is the problem. You got Mr. What's his name? What is his name? Philip Stevens. He says Johnson has taken the opposite course. He's supposed to be a unionist, but Whitehall officials say he's helped to scorn Scotland as too left-wing, spending money raised from English taxpayers on lavish welfare. Now, apart from that, it's quite a nice wee article from Philip Stevens. But
I like that bit. If Boris Johnson has, because presumably at some point he actually gets a look at the books. So if he's still allowing his bigotry to colour it to the point where he still thinks Scotland are subsidy junkies, Barry. Because when we finally go, oh my God, he's going to drop face first into the Tolly and he'll never be able to climb out.
I don't think if he sees the figures or not will make any difference. I don't think he'll be able to understand them.
There's a nice little line here that from the man, what does he say here? English MPs at Westminster will decide what Scotland eats. I got a bit fed up seeing chlorinated chicken mentioned, but I thought that was a nice piece.
Well, if that's what they want to do, they need their own parliament. That's what they need. It should be an English Parliament.
And I've I kind of builder that'll give them a right good quote for putting one up for somewhere just north of about $500 million.
Well, it should be built in France, because that way they'll feel continually under siege, and they won't need the Brexiteers to make them feel under siege in their own land.
If they were ever going to build one, mate, they'd outsource it to the French and the Chinese. On top cordial with a bit of Huawei high-tech stuff thrown in, that would be lovely.
Surrounded by Huawei cameras.
Lovely.
Sure.
I also quite liked another quote. You had two quotes that I liked, this Philip fella. What's this? Miss Sturgeon. Yeah, the thing is about the pro-union government in Wales was equally as critical as Miss Sturgeon. But this internal market legislation is a gift to Scottish nationalism, proof that centrist Scotland is now a prisoner of right-wing English conservatism.
And that's from the Financial Times, folks.
I know, but I mean, that's my point, yes. When you read that in the Financial Times, you go, oh, right.
The Financial Times actually did a really good piece during the referendum on the real reality of the figures. I don't know if you remember it, guys, but it was basically saying, okay, Scotland is not going to be, hugely rich, but it's definitely not going to fail on the economics of it all.
We're not going to be running down to London with a begging bowl like everybody in England has been taught for generations that we would be.
I like the FT. Most of it is built on money. So what they say affects where people put their money, so they tend to be truthful.
They're not ideologues. I mean, I go all the way back to the Thatcher era, and my business partner used to get the FT, the pink, used to get it delivered every day, and so where it was in the office. And there were times, if you wanted to find out what was really happening, you had to, because what did you get otherwise?
No, it's just spam.
I mean, the oligarchs have been running the press in this country for as long as I've been alive before.
And they get their information from the FT, not from their own papers.
Aye, you're right.
Anything else jump out at you in today's press?
Sir Keir Starmer, for some reason or other, he issued a statement or wrote something. Somebody wrote something for him, which he said nothing. Or he did say something. He said, "What I and the Scottish public want is to see our governments getting round the table and working together to defeat this virus and tackle the looming threat of mass unemployment." Okay, that's stating the obvious. But what about the fact that you and your party support Brexit nowadays?
Or
he's up in Scotland for a couple of days.
Why isn't he sitting around the table with Boris?
No, but
why is the Welsh government sitting around the table with Boris?
You'll find out his truth. You'll find out his truth if he's just up here to listen to party members and up here to listen to Scots Labour voices, then he's wasting our time and he's wasting everybody's time. He's certainly wasting his own by spending 7 hours on a train to come from London to Edinburgh. If he wants to know what's going on in Scotland, the last people he wants to speak to are the Scottish Labour Party. There's a reason they're languishing so far in the polls that the Greens and the Liberals are laughing at them. And that reason is that they were given countless messages from the people of Scotland as their vote dropped continually over the last decade, and they listened to not one of them. They think the voters have deserted them. It was the Labour Party that deserted Scotland. And if Keir Starmer can't see that for a few days in Scotland, he's a bigger arse than two bums, and he's not the man that I think he is.
Well, he's not going to see it, is he? He's not going to speak to anybody that's going to tell him anything different.
Well, here's a question. Did he go anywhere? Was he interviewed? Who did he meet?
He's only on the train, and he's only on the tweeted that he was on the train about 3 or 4 hours ago, mate.
So right, it's today he's up here.
Aye, he's on his, that Pence's wee bubble piece in the Mirror or whatever was an introduction, because he's on his way up today.
That was the Scotsman.
He's wasting his time.
Well, he'll be on the local TV tonight then, both BBC and STV.
Right. Would we be surprised if he did a Tory and hid in some union headquarters? Or
I actually would be surprised, mate. Given, I know he let a lot of people down in the start in the Corbyn era because he didn't.
Why?
He kind of pretended to be far more left wing than he is.
Aye.
But I'd be surprised. He's shown some courage in his career. You know, as a director of public prosecutions, to then move into frontline politics. That was kind of a courageous move. He could have stayed in the legal profession and been top boy by the age of 45, 50. And he chose not to. So I'd expect to see him maybe come out and speak to some normal Scots. I don't think he'll be Boris and hide in a fridge.
Do you think, Jimmy, do you think there'll be left-wing protesters outside, especially if he goes to Labour Party HQ in Glasgow?
Unlikely, mate. Colin Fox was on Princess Street yesterday, so that'll be the bus fare's tan for the week.
I miss Colin. I like Colin. Good guy.
He's not stupid. He's not a bad speaker.
Yeah. Colin would have made a good Labour leader.
He's not a bad speaker, Stuart, but see when you're sat outside the Balmoral Hotel waiting on a fare and he's going on and on and on and you're like, come on, hurry up. He is a bad speaker at that point.
Fair enough.
Well, the man has not lost his principles. How long's he been going there? East End of Princess Street? Must be, God, 10 years?
Oh, mate, it's easy because he was doing it before he was an MSP. There was an SSP thing there then.
So it's more like 20 years, I think.
Aye.
A long time since we've interviewed him, Stuart. Give him a ring.
I've still got all the archives from all these people that we have interviewed. Just let me know.
Anything else catch your eye, boys?
We've got more to talk about with Peter A. Bell. He's getting upset again, but it only got published late on, so there's no point going into the details.
This is Peter A. Bell talking about Kenny MacAskill, who's got another piece on wings.
Yes. What's she going on about this time? Will Westminster change? Peter's going on about what's the point? He's explaining why there's no reason to go for a Section 30. Because even if you do, and then you cheer, we're getting a Section 30, we're going to have a referendum. He explains why that's a waste of time.
There was a piece in the Courier where Professor Curtis was interviewed, where he hinted that there could be a possible change in SNP policy, and the 2024 Westminster election could be taken as a vote for independence. If the SNP were to get a majority of seats, they would automatically use that to open up negotiations with the British government.
All right.
Aye, Professor Curtis can wait to take his face for a jobby.
Well, I hope he's wrong.
Scotland wouldn't exist by 2024, mate. Boris will have bloody turned us into, I don't know, Jockistan.
Well, I think they're making a huge mistake here. I really do. I think tactically they've got this completely wrong, Westminster. And I think they're going to give us so much reason to want out that you might even get enough people wanting to renegotiate.
Well, we had the Secretary of State for Scotland with his plumed tones and what's it they used to say, bulls in his mouth, telling us that some committee was at, I think it was a Scottish Parliament, I can't remember what. Anyway,
it must have been Westminster because Deirdre Brock was
busily telling us that Scotland, Wales and Ireland really ought not to confuse the issue. They should actually just follow what England's doing because England has our best interests at heart. And why don't we learn our lesson?
You're doing very well. I love your accent, Jimmy.
He wasn't that specific because I decided to tweet after I watched it that I was surprised he wanted everybody to follow Scotland's lead. I do actually have it, guys, if you want to see it.
Okay.
I'm getting in a bit of a mess here, boys. Give me a second.
Don't get enough ankle, Norman.
Where are we? Share screen. Here is the the Secretary of State for Scotland. It's a bit slow. He
We're
dithers a
one
wee bit
United
in
Kingdom
this.
government and we're 3 devolved administrations, but we are effectively one country. But we are not effectively, we are absolutely one country. We have borders that, as Gillian said, the virus doesn't respect. They are geographical borders, they're not physical borders. And really, we have to understand people move around the UK, whether it's on business or visiting families or on holiday. And what I've come to understand very strongly since I last spoke to you, Wendy, is that we need to stop the confusion. All the administrations in these meetings, weekly meetings we have, should actually just be grown up and not be different for the sake of it to try and, or whatever agenda they have. It hasn't brought anyone to a different outcome. The prevalence of the virus is pretty, is as high in any part of the UK as another. You can point to low areas and high areas, but on average, we're all 4 nations are experiencing similar problems. And whether it's changes to social distancing rules or the joint biosecurity centre, the quarantine I talked about earlier, or even, the UK government has a hands, face, space message to the public. The Scottish government have gone for facts, and
I think we'll call it a day at that. But he droned on.
Oh,
Aye, as he does.
And I actually think that this might be, although joined up writing with the Scottish office and the UK government is not a regular thing, this might be the first step in trying to share out blame for the testing regime between the 4 nations rather than it being laid where it belongs, in Westminster's lap.
Well, I just seen a wee thing there while you were running that clip, mate. So this afternoon's story, people, is going to be that Victorian pipe cleaner in a suit, Jacob Rees-Mogg, the leader of the House, has just or recently said in Parliament that people complaining about not being able to get a COVID test at the moment because the testing is such a mess in England should stop their endless carping. That really isn't going to play well with a lot of journals and a lot of people in the country, is it?
He's blown himself up. This is Rees-Mogg, the constitutional expert, the man who believes that Parliament is supreme. The rules of Parliament have to be obeyed and followed, who has supported a government who is about to break an international treaty.
Because people of his class only have to follow the rules that they choose to follow, Norman.
I should have understood that, Jimmy.
Well, the rule of 6 won't suit him. He's already got 5 kids, hasn't he?
He'll have to throw his wife in the back garden, where I have a funny feeling she lives in a shed anyway. I think maybe Nanny gets to share the marital bed.
Right.
Oh dear.
I heard a rumour that Boris was back with his wife or something.
What?
Well, he's no wheel, is he? And that doesn't bode well with a young, thrusting mother of his latest child. God, well, there you go.
I would imagine if Boris went back to his wife, who, I don't know, I hope has recovered from her cancer, the first thing she would do is shoot him and get a medal for it.
Well, she apparently was the rock in his life in the last 10 years.
All right. So you think due to his political incompetence, he needs to go back to the rock?
Back to mummy.
Nothing would surprise me with that man.
Perhaps it was underneath her that he found Dominic Cummings.
There's so many ways that could be taken, Jimmy.
Absolutely.
We'll presume as the strange things you find under a rock is what you meant.
Yes, yes, of course, Norman, of course.
Anything else that jumped out at us today?
No, I'm done, mate.
I think I'm going to go for a lovely walk because it's a lovely sunny day. First one for quite a while.
Lucky you. Are you back to work, James?
Yes, I am chomping at the bit, mate, as you can tell.
Well, I'm just going to sit on my backside, to be honest, because I
you
can't
want me-
walk very far anyway.
Do you want me to drop off a bottle of rum for you, mate?
No, I have several bottles of whiskey that are still untouched. And I need to start getting stuck into them.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thanks for being with us, Stuart Lockhead,
Aye.
Jimmy Hutton,
Cheers.
and I'm Norrie Stewart. Thanks for listening, folks. And we'll be back with you tomorrow, Friday. Jimmy, are you going to make tomorrow, do you think?
Oh, see what I can do, mate. See what I can
See
do.
what you can do.
Good man.
Okay, we'll catch you all tomorrow. Thanks for listening, folks. Cheers for now.